So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the IACT IDHA virtual chapter for March what year is this? 2020. I almost said 2002. I'm time warping here. So here we are. We've got a couple announcements we want to make as we just sort of kick the thing off. This weekend in Florida is the Hypnosis Education Association. For any of you that are in Florida, you might want to check that out over in Oldsmar. And there's also a virtual hypnosis course if you want to learn how to use Zoom and do hypnosis online starting on March 24th. You can contact me about that. And Karen, do you have anything to announce?
Yes, I want to add, we need to mute Larry for a moment because we're getting some feedback between Larry's speaker and Cheryl's.
Okay.
And Cheryl's going to have to turn down her speaker, or Larry's going to have to turn his down or something because the feedback is now gone. But it's happening.
I turned Larry's mic off, that's why.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to.
There will be a feedback loop continuing.
Cheryl has headsets, so she shouldn't have speaker sound going out.
Agreed.
Okay, so Larry's microphone is open now, and it seems to be fine.
Okay.
So we'll go with that.
Could that be open as well as this, honey?
There we go. Yeah, there's an echo.
If there's an echo, we've got two mics on at this end.
Right.
Now, so
Oh, actually,
Cheryl,
1, 2, 3.
one of them is muted.
Larry, talk again.
1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1.
I'm going to leave the room.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm going to a different room.
I think that will fix it. So while that's happening,
Did that fix it? Did that fix it?
Yeah, I think it did. It did.
Okay.
Okay, so go ahead, Karen.
Michael, I do announce the Hypno Expo April 24th through 26th.
The Hypno Expo, April 24th to 26th, right here. Hypno Expo 2020 here in Orlando, Florida. No, I didn't announce it, shall I?
No, I just did, but I just wanted to make sure that we got that in and let everybody remind everybody that it's in Orlando. It's going to be easy to get to, et cetera, April 24th through 26th.
So Karen, that is going to be great too. By the way, have you heard the rumor?
What?
Well, next month on the virtual chapter, we're going to have a guest, and I'll give you 3 clues about who it isn't.
Who it isn't? Okay.
Yeah, it isn't Steve Jobs.
Okay.
And it isn't Davy Jones.
Ah.
And it isn't H.G. Wells.
Who could it possibly be?
I don't know, but the G kind of rang a bell, didn't it?
It did, didn't it?
As a matter of fact, G as in Gordon, Steve G. Jones is going to be our guest next month to talk about how to make money in hypnosis. So hey, he seems to be the guy who knows about it. He was on Millionaire Bachelor and Below Deck, one of those shows. So we're looking forward to seeing him. So that's going to be a great show next month, second Tuesday of next month.
And of course, we have Col H Larry Elman tonight, but a couple of things before we begin that. CEUs are being offered. You can get your CEUs by contacting IACT IMDHA. Just sign up, say I was here, and you get your CEUs. That goes if you're watching the recording as well. And many other organizations, ICBCH, International Hypnosis Federation, all give you CEUs for attending this as well. So all the friendly organizations will. Just ask them, and I'm sure that they'll give you the CEUs.
Okay.
I do want to say, Michael, if you don't have anything else to say, let me introduce Larry, if you don't mind.
Please go.
I love this man. I really do. Cheryl and Larry Elman are 2 of my favorite people in the hypnosis world, and Larry is amazing. Col H Larry Elman, we do still get to call you Colonel, do we not?
That's right.
All right. He is Dave Elman.
Retired officers are allowed to be addressed by their rank.
Excellent. I know that you've heard of Dave Elman. He wrote Hypnotherapy, that green leather book. Yes. Well, Larry is his son. And he took his dad's hypnosis courses several times before he went to MIT, wised up, and did something else for a living for a while. Of course, he came back, because we always do we not? He became an aeronautical engineer. During his career in engineering and the Air Force, Larry had to restrict his hypnosis activities, well, at least overtly. We may find out how he used them covertly a time or two, because he did study right from the best. Now he is CEO of the Dave Elman Hypnosis Institute. Larry teaches and lectures hypnosis internationally while producing recordings that demonstrate Dave Elman's medical hypnosis methods. He also gives certification courses, advanced hypnosis instruction, and offers courses worldwide. And we have him tonight exclusively as our guest. Thank you, Larry, so much for joining us. You know how thrilled we are.
I'm very honored to be here. I'm a member of your virtual chapter, and I've enjoyed a number of our colleagues being here over the months and years. So I feel very honored to be here.
So Larry, I am just thrilled to have you here. And I don't know if you remember, but this evening is the culmination of a conversation that we had last August, I guess, in Las Vegas, I believe. And one of the reasons we've got a lot of things to talk about, and I really want to hear some stories about your dad and stuff. There's just one little piece of business that I mentioned to you that I'd love to get out of the way, because somehow or another, and I know you know that this is the case, there are people in the world of hypnosis who think that you and I shouldn't be friends with each other because, well, you're related to that Elman guy, and somehow or another, I seem to have come through an Ericksonian path, and people just love to divide hypnosis into which of these two camps are you in. Something that's amazing to me is we're talking about two fellows who both made a hell of a contribution to the world of hypnosis, and whatever their differences were with one another, most of those are things that are over and done 50 years ago. What
Pretty much.
Pretty much, and yet there are some differences, and I wonder, and you mentioned to me some things I thought were really nice about the differences in their approaches that I'd love to hear if you could just make a couple comments about that, and then we could just kind of put this whole thing away.
Certainly. Erickson was a psychiatrist, and the result is his view of hypnosis and of his patients was one of several sessions, relatively spaced out, what is normal for a psychiatric situation. In that sort of a situation, you are not as interested in rapidity as you would be in where my father came from. Dad had been a stage hypnotist, and they have to be fast. And the committee of doctors that drafted him, it's the best way to put it, into teaching hypnosis to doctors, had the speed as one of their major considerations. So my father's view of the patient, or we would say today client, and Erickson's view are from entirely different perspectives. Mm. In addition to that, Erickson was extremely nervous about whether or not a non-medical person, non-licensed person who's not a doctor should be allowed to work with hypnosis. And therefore, from his point of view, getting my father to shut up was a test case. So you have a situation of two competent hypnotists approaching hypnosis from different perspectives and with different goals in mind. I could speak at length on what this led to in the way of disagreements, but that's not what we're here for, nor is that relevant, as you already said, 50 years later. So I'll simply tell an incident that happened recently, when I say recently, last 5 or 10 years, in all of my certification courses, I require that everybody have an introduction to each of the major methodologies, not just to Elmanian, but to Elmanian, Ericksonian, NLP, and on down the line. And for the Ericksonian, for a number of years, I had a close friend of mine who was a wonderful Ericksonian and a tremendous lady come in and give the lecture. And one particular time, there was a traffic accident on the interstate, and she didn't get there. So I stalled, I rearranged the order of lectures, I did everything I could, but she still wasn't there. So finally, I just began giving it. And I'm in the middle of it when she walks in. So I wave to her and say, take the podium. She goes and sits down in the back. So I finish the lecture, and I go over to her sort of hat in hand and say, did I do all right? And she says, yes, you covered everything I would have covered, and you were very fair about it. Yeah. So I considered that a high compliment. Mm-hmm. I get on well with Ericksonians, provided one thing, and that is that they are client-centered. And that goes not only for Ericksonians, but for just about any hypnotist. Sure. If you're client-centered, if you're watching the client and trying to make your suggestions match what will be acceptable to the client and aim for whatever goal it is, fine, we get on okay.
Great.
If, however, you're just reading from a script and you don't bother to look at the client at all, I don't want to know you, because that's not hypnosis.
Larry, it's so interesting you say that. I hear that come from you in particular, because that's not actually, if I was a newbie in the business, that's not necessarily the way I think I might see it. I don't know that for sure, but I might see it. And I swim in both pools. I think I use all of the elements when I'm with clients. Sometimes they need a directive approach, and sometimes they need a permissive approach. And as you said, you got to do what the client needs. But I would see the Elmanian approach as more authoritarian, more directed. You do it my way. And the Ericksonian approach is more permissive. Perhaps you want to do it this way. That would be my view. So it just surprised me a little bit that you see it from a different perspective.
I don't agree at all with what you've posited. By direct suggestion, we mean you are saying something directly. It is an order, a command, I don't know what you want to call it.
Sure.
But it is not given authoritatively except if absolutely necessary. If you're on the stage and you're doing stage hypnosis, you will give your suggestions authoritatively because the audience expects it. But if you're dealing with a client in your office, you are giving it more in a salesy manner. Mm-hmm. You are not being authoritative. I put up a chart every time that I have a certification course. Chart's the wrong thing, a graph. One side of the graph, let me move over, whoops, wrong direction. One side of the graph is direct suggestion, the other side is indirect suggestion. The top is authoritative, the bottom is permissive. And then I ask my students, where on this chart should you put a suggestion? And we kick this around for a while. And the answer basically is that the suggestion should go where on the total page it will be most effective to the client. Right. Sometimes it'll be authoritative, sometimes it'll be permissive. That's exactly right. Sometimes it'll be direct, sometimes it'll be indirect. And we then would draw on the chart where we think most suggestions from a particular hypnotist would go. And we'll kick several hypnotists onto there. The point that they come away with is you vary these characteristics as needed. Now, if you listen to some of my father's recordings, you will find that when he is working with a patient on a medical problem, he's very quiet, he's very sympathetic, or actually empathetic, he's very into the client. He's not authoritative. He doesn't have to be. He'll give a direct suggestion, but he gives it in a friendly manner. Remember, one of the most important things for a hypnotist is rapport. How much rapport do you get when you're screaming at somebody?
Right.
None.
If anybody has a question about that, go to YouTube and watch Larry Elman do the Elman Induction, because it is very gentle. It is very gentle, the way that you actually administer or do that induction. That can be done very authoritarian in that kind of style.
It can be done, you're absolutely correct. It can be done either way. If you're on the stage, you may be more authoritarian because you're impressing the audience.
Right.
When you're with somebody who's come in for fear of flying, you don't want to be authoritative. You want to get rapport with them so that when you say to them, there's no need for this fear because here's how you're going to conquer it. You want a rapport. You want them thinking of you as a friend. So you vary what you're doing to match. And as I already said, if you get some of my father's recordings and listen to how this is done, you will find that most of them, particularly medical situations, are very gentle. You'll also find that some of them are not so gentle when the situation demands it. A new hypnotist needs in his or her first certification course to learn that since you're trying to get rapport, you vary your voice, your attitude, and everything else so as to get the client and you on the same page.
Lovely. Lovely. So Larry, there's something else too. I mean, I really want to. I'm getting an echo still. I don't know what's happening, but hopefully it's not too bad. I want to make sure that we get to talk about some of these lovely stories that I'm really anxious to hear about. There is one other thing that I think is kind of the sort of more serious side of this conversation, and that is your father is hugely famous in the world of hypnosis, and particularly famous for the Elman Induction, and whether that's for good or for ill, I'm not quite sure. Because I noticed that when somebody that was unable to be with us tonight wrote me a note and said, I'm not going to be able to be there tonight, and I'm really disappointed because I really like the Dave Elman technique. And it concerns me that I think there are a whole lot of people who don't appreciate or understand the scope of what your father did. And there's this induction, and they don't really know anything else. Do you have any comment about that, or?
Yes, I do. My father taught dozens of inductions. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of variations. But one of the first ones he would teach a new class would be what you and I today refer to as the DEI, the Dave Elman Induction. There were two reasons for it. One reason was it's a great induction for your first time using hypnosis with a new client, or in the doctor's case, with a new patient, so that it's a great introduction. But there's also another reason, and that is it has so many parts to it that illustrate that you want to have tests and convincers, that by the time you've been through it, you have the tools to develop your own induction to improve some other induction, you've got basically an erector set. And that's what it's supposed to be. So when somebody says, well, I use the Dave Elman Induction on every patient all the time, I think to myself, no, you've missed the point. I want you to use it. I want you to learn from it, but I don't want you to let it hem you in. There are so many places where you can pick up a piece of it and use that separately.
Wonderful. All right. I don't have a microphone. So you out there, Karen?
I am.
Why don't you talk to this lovely fellow?
Okay. All right. So are you having problems with your mic? Is that where it's coming from, Michael?
No, it's fine now.
Oh, okay. All right. So there is one thing that I am curious about. Because Larry, you said this at the outset, that your dad and Erickson agreed with one thing, and that was that lay hypnotists shouldn't be using this. But that's changed. How would he feel about that today? I mean, I know that you are exceptional, but you're a lay hypnotist, are you not?
I am.
Yeah, and you use it wonderfully. What would your dad say about that these days?
My father, in the 1940s through the 1960s, was looking at a society that was extremely afraid of hypnosis. He was looking at trying to get it into medical use. Therefore, he had to be extremely hard-nosed about you don't allow a hypnotist to do something medical. You have him assist the doctor. If he's doing something separate from the doctor, it's with the doctor having given approval and knowing what's going on. You follow the doctor's orders. Partly this is a legal question, as it is today, and partly it is a sociological question with when he was teaching. Did he object to a lay hypnotist? No. When I was going through the course, he one day said to me, fairly upset, Larry, you haven't been doing your homework. And I said, but Dad, I've hypnotized every kid in my class that I can get. I've run out of kids. Well, you're going to have to look further. Start being a stage hypnotist so you get a larger audience. And so for a piece of high school, I was a stage hypnotist, probably the world's worst. I don't claim to be good at it, but I did. So was my father totally against lay hypnotists? No. He was against mixing a lay hypnotist with a medical problem in a manner that would generate problems for the profession. Mm-hmm. I believe that if you reincarnated both my father and Erickson today and told both of them, shut up for a week and just observe, because both of them were capable of talking too much. And if you said that and they observed, at the end of a week of seeing the wondrous things we can do, mm-hmm. the things that don't violate a medical boundary, and also the things that when you get to a medical boundary, you do so in cooperation with the medical profession. They saw that. I don't think either of them could object the way we run today. Mm-hmm. I know that Erickson did not believe that the hypnosis profession, the lay hypnosis profession, could self-police to the point where there would not be a violation of medical ethics. He didn't believe that such a thing could happen. We as a profession have shown that it can happen. We do this all the time. So I believe that what we're doing is both in the tradition of my father and in the tradition of his competitor. I think both of them would look upon such things as weight loss, smoking cessation, test anxiety, fears, all of these things that are the bread and butter of our profession as, gee, that's great.
Yeah.
You said the most important thing, Larry. You said, in your opinion, they would have both evolved with the times.
Exactly.
And training, as you also alluded to, has to evolve with the times.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
For those people who are still just using the Elman all the time, every time, I don't think it's their fault. I think they were undertrained or mistrained.
Mistrained is the way I would put it.
Sure.
Well,
can I interrupt, Larry? Because
yeah, go ahead.
I want to make sure that we get into the good stuff, and this is just a crucial point here when we're talking about training. My gosh, you know, I found out the other day that Milton Erickson, by the way, was not a certified hypnotherapist. I understand that your father wasn't a certified hypnotherapist either, but that he was he had something in common with our friend Karen Hand here. That is, he was a broadcaster, for one thing. Let us know about this. How did your dad get into hypnosis in the first place? How does that work?
Okay. Well, you have to go back to my grandfather, Jacob Kopelman, commonly known as Jake. Jake ran a business in Fargo, North Dakota, which supplied stage material to vaudeville troupes, which meant that socially he knew an awful lot of stage hypnotists. And he got interested. And through them, he got a hypnosis library started, and through them, he learned quite a bit. And when there was no vaudeville troupe in town, he was the town's hypnotist. So when my father was about 6 years old, Jake decided to take him along on a particular case. The case was a young lady of about 13 who had suddenly, with no warning, gone from normal behavior to totally undecipherable stuttering, really bad stuttering. And it had come on suddenly with no warning. Now, you ask the average hypnotist in IACT, IMDHA today, take a guess at what that is. And virtually all of them will say, just because of the suddenness and the fact that it wasn't a little kid, it's a 13-year-old young lady, they'd say, oh, she's run into a trauma she can't handle, and that's what's caused it. Relieve the emotion of the trauma, and then you can give her a post-hypnotic suggestion, and she'll be fine. Isn't that what most of us would say? Sure, it's an obvious solution. But Jake had not been adequately trained in this. And I don't even know if anybody understood this in 1906. So he takes my father along. They go to the person's house. Jake does a very quick induction. It goes perfectly. And as soon as she's induced, the young lady stops stuttering. He gives a few superficial suggestions and he emerges her. She immediately starts stuttering again. He tries this a couple of times, and anytime she's induced, no stutter. Anytime she's out of hypnosis, severe stutter. And he has no idea where to go from there. They leave, and my father is now convinced that hypnosis doesn't work. Remember, he's only 6 years old. He doesn't have the insight that I've just said that all of us have. All he knows is it didn't work. About 2 years later, Jake comes down with cancer, and it's obvious it's going to kill him. And it gets so painful, he's unable to do anything with the family. And it's disruptive to the young children, of which my father is one of the younger ones. When suddenly a hypnotist shows up, I suspect it was a stage hypnotist, but we've never identified who it was. The hypnotist hypnotizes Jake and gives him hypnotic anesthesia. And Jake resumes playing with his children. For my father, this is amazing. Now, every time my father told me or told anybody with me present, he said, then he left for school the next day and came home to find that Jake had died. And that's all he could remember. That was how he always told the story. I was in my probably 40s, I don't know exactly, when one of my very elderly relatives said, that's not what happened. What happened was Jake did fine with hypnotic anesthesia for enough days that he said to his wife, I've got to go collect a bill owed me by one of my customers. I'm going by train tomorrow to collect the bill. Got on the train, died on the train during school hours. So Dad gets home and Jake is dead. Now, if you go with the story from the elderly relative, what the hypnotist had taught Jake was not just hypnotic anesthesia. It was post-hypnotic suggestion. It was self-hypnosis. It was how to control so much of what was going on near the end of his life. And so it's to me, a very moving story. And the extent to which my father could only tell 2 pieces of it with the middle missing is a measure of how much grief the family had. Well, they started dividing up Jake's belongings. My father asked to have the Hypnosis Library, and nobody else wanted it. So he began reading the Hypnosis Library. This is an 8 or 9-year-old kid trying to read things like Bernheim. I've never been able to do Bernheim cover to cover. I can't do it. It's too tough to read. And by the way, I mentioned that at a hypnosis convention once, very embarrassedly, and Shelley Stockwell interrupted me and said, I got the same problems, so don't be ashamed of it. It's a tough read.
Yeah.
Anyhow, between running into the stage hypnotists, reading Jake's library, and asking the eye doctor and various other physicians around Fargo, my father became interested in and an experimenter in hypnosis. And he developed the DEI basically from experiments with a heavy input of what did Bernheim say? So that's the origin of it, is experimentation. By the way, what did Bernheim say? Bernheim pointed out that if you hypnotize somebody for some purpose, emerge them, and then hypnotize them again sometime later, they are likely to go deeper. Not every time, but often enough so if you do hypnosis on them several times in a row, you'll go from this depth to this depth.
Sounds like the lead vaccination.
That's exactly what it is. My father read this in Bernheim and decided it isn't the time between inductions, it's the fact that you're repeating them. So on the steps of the junior high school in Fargo, North Dakota, when he was 12 years old, my father tried it on one of his classmates. The classmate went immediately to somnambulism. My father was shocked. He called over a second classmate. The second classmate went there as well. Now, I'll stick a little something in there that Dad never stuck in when he would use this to teach his students, and that is the second classmate seeing the first classmate has already had what amounts to awakened suggestion.
Yeah.
So it's easier on the second. But my father didn't know this. My father had no conception of this. Once 2 had gone in a row, he called over a third. When the third one also entered somnambulism, my father concluded, I have a method. Now let's just perfect it. That's the origin of the DEI.
Yeah. And he did indeed have a method that worked.
Yeah.
But when he got somebody in his office who didn't have the other person to model, what did he evolve that into?
Well, by the time he got to that stage, he'd gotten pretty good at waking hypnosis. You talk to your client before you try an induction, and you talk to him in a manner where he is already receptive. Your waking hypnosis talk is that other guy standing there being an example.
Uh-oh, watch out, Larry. That sounded very Ericksonian.
I don't care. If it works, it works.
And I know that you know all about covert hypnosis, and this is probably not the right place to talk about it, but I got to, before we run out of time, have you tell the story about you doing covert hypnosis while you were working in the aerospace engineering world. I am very touched by a story you tell about a commander telling you, no, you cannot talk to the engineers. It would be a waste of time.
Oh, yes. It was not in the Air Force, it was in the defense industry, but you got the basic idea correct. My boss.
Facts stand in the way of a good story.
Exactly. My boss calls me over one day and tells me that they were having failures on the last test run before they'd ship a new engine out to the fleet. This engine had been in production for close to 20 years and had never had a failure on the last test. Now, if the engine fails on the last test, and now I am talking $1970, so add a couple of zeros. If it fails on the last test, you have to disassemble the engine and individually inspect every single piece, even a nut or bolt. And the cost of disassembling, inspecting everything, putting it back together, and so on and so forth is $1 million. So a failure at that point, shall we say, it gets management attention. Mm-hmm. So he calls me over and he informs me that I am to be the investigator on this. He said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to go down to the test stand and talk to the crew that actually saw this happen. And he absolutely blows up. He said, you will not do that. I said, why not? He said, none of them are college educated. All of them belong to the labor union, so they're going to lie to protect their jobs. And none of them are honest men. So you will not do that. You will simply read the reports. Okay, boss. So I watched from my desk until he headed to the men's room. Then I headed in to see whether he used a stall or a urinal. When he headed into a stall, I went rushing over to his secretary and said, I'm going down to the library. I'll be in the stacks where they don't have a phone. I'll see you in a couple of hours. And out the door. I go down to the test stand and I start asking questions, and they all clammed up. They wouldn't answer. So I waited a little bit. When it was obvious they wouldn't answer, I said to one of them, will you and the rest of your crew do me a favor? What's that? I said, if anybody asks you, particularly my boss, I was never here. What do you mean you were never here? So then I described what my boss had ordered. One of them said, but you're here anyway. I said, yeah, but you can't tell my boss. I don't need to get fired. So I was never here, right? And at that point, one of them reaches into his pocket, pulls out an oil-stained sheet of paper and said, here's the evidence. And he handed me a sheet of paper. And on it, it had some problems that they had hit during the test that allowed me to go back to my desk and work from there to find exactly what went wrong with the engine.
Nice.
And from my perspective, all you did was read the reports.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It was just another report. Thank you very much.
That was what he asked for. So Larry, I understand that both your father and your mother have some connection with the Esdale induction. Can you talk about that a little?
Oh, yes. And when my father was a stage hypnotist, one of the major worries of stage hypnotists at that time was if somebody went into Esdale, which at the time was called the hypnotic coma, they were really very upset. There was no reliable method for getting them back out. And if they did not come out when the hypnotist gave whatever suggestions he gave, the hypnotist would say to the theater owner, well, just lock them in the theater, come by early in the morning and give them a good breakfast of bacon and eggs because they'll just sleep it off and they'll be fine. And the theater owner would be like, oh. At that point, the local sheriff would step up and say, well, you're going to have a good breakfast of bacon and eggs tomorrow, too. We're keeping you in the jail so that you're here to get them out if they don't come out by themselves. Off they go. So the average stage hypnotist was very, very worried about this.
Sure.
My father did something the rest of them hadn't done. Every time he ran into somebody who'd been in the hypnotic coma, the Esdale state, whether from him or from a colleague, he would sit down with them and ask them to tell him what it felt like and what their thought process was. Based on that, what he concluded was, if you are in the Esdale state, you are enjoying yourself to the point where you want the hypnotist to just go away. That's why you ignore the hypnotist. That's why you don't take emerging suggestions, because you don't want to. It isn't that you don't hear them. You hear them, but you're having too much fun. Yeah. Having learned that, my father decided, well, this is like a donkey that won't move. Remember, Fargo was in the middle of a farming area. So Dad grew up knowing that if you have a donkey that won't move, you either wave a carrot in front of his nose or you kick him in the butt. Those are the only two ways he's going to move. Well, for a stage hypnotist, you don't have a carrot. So what mentally will kick them in the butt? And the answer was to say, if you don't follow the next emerging suggestion immediately, I will fix it so you can never enjoy hypnosis again for the rest of your life. Now, can you do this? Probably not. But to the person who is in the Esdale state, that is a serious threat. So they emerge. So Dad taught that to his students. But they would ask him, please induce Esdale so we can actually see it. I don't know how to. One day as they're leaving, my mother, she had a way of putting her hands on her hips and kind of cocking her head to one side and saying, Dave. And that meant she has an idea. You better listen. Dave, I know how to put somebody into Esdale. Pauline, how do you know? I've been watching you. I know everything you're doing right and everything you're doing wrong. So my mother invented the Esdale induction about 30 years after Dad invented the Esdale emergence.
Lovely.
Now, if I can just hit one other thing on it. In teaching this, my father used to put somebody into Esdale tell the class, you try to get this person out, and I'll leave the room. He did that one day, and the class, of course, couldn't figure out what to do. And then two people in the class who had been friends of this particular doctor since they were in elementary school got over in the corner and they're whispering, and they said, pull the fire alarm. It's an emergency. That'll bring him out. So they pulled the fire alarm. He didn't move. My father comes back in, emerges him, and these two guys go running over and they say, why didn't you move? He said, if it were a real fire, we've been friends for so many years, the two of you would have picked me up and carried me out. Since you didn't, I knew it was a trick.
Yeah.
That teaches us a very important point about Esdale. They are still hearing, they are still thinking. Don't presume they're not.
All parts of the mind still working for them, even the conscious mind. Still
Exactly.
working for them. By the way, I'm just a little bit offended that your mother didn't get the due credit that she deserves, because you just described an instant induction that she invented that she's never gotten credit for. And you just did it. You just showed it to us.
You haven't listened to the things I've made. I always credit my mother.
Well, I'm just saying that was her instant induction. Dave! And instantly your father went into a trance state that he could not break. It worked every time. That was Pauline's instant induction.
Would you like another quick one on my mother?
Sure.
Especially if it's a secret, because I promised we'd get a secret out of you.
It is.
Good.
My father believed that his breakfast was not over until he'd had 2 cups of coffee. It was almost religious with him. So one day he finishes his 2nd cup but didn't remember it. And he says, Pauline, why don't you pour me my 2nd cup of coffee? Dave, you've had your 2nd cup. No, I haven't. So my mother walks over and gets the coffee pot and pours him what is actually his 3rd cup. But as she does so, she looks over her shoulder, she winks at me, and she gives this little cocked head thing I've mentioned. This tells me whatever she's going to do, play along, you're in the supporting role.
Another instant induction.
The next day, we come in, he finishes his 1st cup and my mother stands up. So I immediately stood up too. Pauline, where are you going? I'm getting to work. You've had your 2nd cup of coffee. No, I haven't. Yes, Dad, you have had. 2 of us leave for the office to get to work. He reluctantly follows us. For about a week and a half, we went 3 cups, 1 cup, 3 cups, 1 cup, 3 cups, 1 cup. It took him about a week and a half before he caught on. And remember, he's pretty much the guy who invented waking hypnosis.
Sure. Wow.
While you're there, tell us about his 3-puff induction.
Oh, yes.
Back in the days when hypnotists even smoked in their office.
This is now a cigarette. He'd walk up to somebody, he'd say, very interesting. I'm going to take 3 puffs on this cigarette and you're going to go right into hypnosis quite deeply. My goodness, your eyes are blinking. You can't keep them open. And then a deepener. Worked every time. Now, I use it today, but with the change in society, I have to do it with 3 sips of a cup of water or coffee or whatever.
Absolutely.
Remember, it's very simple. You tell them what's going to happen in like 1 to 1.5 sentences, not strung out, just real quick. And then it's, your eyes are blinking, you can't keep them open, and a deepener. That's it.
Nice.
But here's the nice thing about it. When Dad had a class of, say, 25 doctors, he'd do this on a doctor. He'd emerge the doctor and say, now you're going to do that on that doctor over there, but you can't use a cigarette. So this doctor, and he'd think of something and he'd go over it, work on the second one. He'd emerge that doctor, my father, go over and say, you got to do it on the one over there, but you can't use what either I or other doctor used. And I'd sit there and I'd watch this in class, and the person I was always very, very empathetic for is number 25. By then you're running out of things to use.
By the way, people often talk about the Erickson handshake induction, and the thing that's funny about this is, of course, Richard Bandler made a lot of variations on it and got a lot of attention for it, and quite frankly, the technique that's usually demonstrated because of his paralysis is one that Milton Erickson never could have even done in the first place. But I understand that your father was an inventor of a handshake induction that seems to follow this very principle that you're talking about now. Right?
I'll say that I don't believe that either Erickson or Elman should be credited with inventing that.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I say that is handshake inductions were fairly common among stage hypnotists in the period from 1890 to 1910.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know who invented it.
I know your dad's to be very similar, at least the one that I understand, to be very similar to what you were just talking about with the 3-puff induction. That is, the first, I'm going to shake your hand 3 times, right? And the first time, you know, your eyes are going to flutter and et cetera, same way.
Exactly. Or if you've got a bunch of people who you've already hypnotized, like, say, a stage hypnotist, and he's already induced 5 guys in a row, he might walk up to the 6th person, stick out his hand, and as the man grabs it, go, sleep, then walk on to the next one. And it'll work fine because the man has already seen all of the others induced, and so he's already got a suggestion going. Just goes right ahead.
Nice. So did your dad get kidnapped?
No, I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I knew that there was an
Yes.
Elman kidnapping.
Yes.
So what's that about?
Well, first of all, we lived in an extremely anti-Semitic town, and I was frequently beaten up on my way to or from school. But in addition to that, my father, in the early part of World War II, had assisted the FBI and was credited with taking down 2 Nazi spy rings. We used to kid in the family that he was the only Jewish member of a Nazi spy ring, which is an exaggeration, but it would get a laugh. One day, I'm playing in the garden, and some older children come up to me and offer to have me play with them. Now, you know the psychology of a 4 or 5-year-old. If an 8-year-old says, come play a game with us, that's a big compliment, and you hang after.
Yeah.
So I did. And they tied me to a tree and doused me thoroughly with gasoline, and then began dancing around the tree with lighted matches.
Oh, wow.
Now, this was not kids playing, because how many kids carry a 5-gallon can of gas, 50 feet of rope, and 2 or 3 boxes of matches?
Wow.
This was pre-planned. Because of what I've already referred to of my father and the FBI, we had an assigned federal bodyguard. My father always said he was an FBI man. I don't know if it was FBI, Secret Service, I don't know what he was, but he was. And for years after this, I tried to figure out why my parents didn't know anything about this and why the guy wasn't there when they grabbed me. And I finally figured it out. So what I'm going to say is my figuring it out, not what I can prove. if you were watching me in the rose garden at the time and you needed to make a call of nature, the nearest bathroom was go in through the kitchen. It was the one immediately above the kitchen. So you go running in, up the stairs into there. And that one's window overlooked where I was supposed to be playing. So if he went there and then looks out the window and realizes I ain't there, he'd be coming, but he'd be delayed by just enough for what I've already described. Anyway, he got there when the matches were lit, but before I was lit. Chased them off. When they ran away, they leaped into a car that was waiting and took off, which backs what I just said about it was pre-planned.
Yeah.
So why didn't my folks know about it? J. Edgar Hoover had announced to all of his agents that if they were to lose somebody they were guarding, they would within 24 to 36 hours be on Guadalcanal with a rifle. So do you think he's going to write it up in the daily log?
Right.
No. And why didn't my parents know? Because if he's not writing it up in the daily log, hey, Larry, you say anything about this, I'll kill you instead of them.
Wow.
So I had quite a number of allergies and trauma-related medical problems for quite a number of years till my father finally decided he would use regression to find the root cause. And he found the root cause, but he didn't understand the root cause. He'd say, I don't understand why the guard never told me. There were times Dad could be naive. I know why the guy never told him, but Dad couldn't figure that out. Okay, you know.
And so consequently, does that mean he did not believe you?
No, he believed me.
He believed the whole regression story and all of that. He didn't doubt.
Yeah, he believed what he found in the regression, and he used that to relieve a lot of my traumas and get me past the problems I was having medically. So he believed, but he couldn't figure out why. So.
Well, that's dramatic. So your father had, by the way, some significant war service, yeah, and there's one of the things here in my list of notes that I'm especially intrigued by because one of my favorite folks on the planet maybe was Eleanor Roosevelt, and you have an Eleanor Roosevelt story that I'd like to hear.
Oh yes. In those days, if they called them the MC, today we call them the host, the person who runs a show on radio or TV. If that person took sick and was absent for more than 2 weeks, the show was canceled by the network and a different show substituted. So the result is if you caught a minor cold, you doggone well got worried. You know, you couldn't afford an absence. Dad needed surgery for gallstones, gallbladder surgery, which would take him out several weeks. And he was very concerned with this. And Eleanor Roosevelt, First Lady of the United States, wife of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, came up from Washington, D.C. and ran the show till Dad got out of the hospital. She came up 2 or 3 other times for other purposes, but this formed a bond of friendship between them. And then in World War II, she wanted to have things that would keep, let's see, how do I put it in a family way? Oh, well, I'll be blunt. Keep the soldiers from hitting the red light district. So she pushed the idea of we've got to have things on base that will keep them entertained. When she decided to push for that, she contacted Dad, and the 2 of them together made a movie about hobbies and about good things to do when you're off duty. And this, again, helped cement this friendship between them.
That's a pretty powerful lineage you talk about there, Larry. I mean, that's rubbing shoulders with some very powerful people.
Oh, yes. Yes.
In very powerful times.
I was very, very lucky in who my parents were. Not just dad, but also mom. So.
Absolutely. You do talk an awful lot about the use of waking hypnosis. That story you talk about with the engineers slipping off and talking to them, the very act of saying, I'm not supposed to be here, don't tell my boss I'm here, was a covert suggestion, rapport building, and give me a suggestion of being one of you and give me the information. Oh, rolled into one, was it not?
Yeah, although a piece of advice for all of my younger colleagues just getting into the business, for you, for Michael, this is all old hand. For the younger troops, if you're thinking about what we just said, an idea like that will hit you. And if it hits you, go with it. Could I have pre-planned that? No, I could not have pre-planned that.
No, but you were being a wonderful hypnotist by observing the surroundings and putting two and two together.
Right.
And knowing
exactly
says be
aware.
Right.
Be aware.
Right. And being aware of balancing out reality with what could happen or should happen. You had some piece of information that they would know what was going on. You were able to notice when they were standoffish that that wasn't necessarily congruent with what they would really know. And so you offered an out. You offered a solution.
Right. And in that case, I offered a solution that was basically, you protect me.
Right.
So they didn't feel threatened. They didn't feel anything.
No, it was a great rapport builder. It was a great rapport builder. You became one of them. They became one of you. You guys were allies. You were in it together.
Yeah.
Which allowed the suggestion to let me know what's going on to stick, right? That's really, I bet that's not the only place you use waking hypnosis. Do you use it on purpose sometimes?
I've used it in a number of other places. In the Air Force at one point, I was put in charge of roughly 40 or 50 men who had a specific task. And normally, the young lieutenant in charge of a task like that will be very rough and get this done. And I thought about it for a minute, and luckily I had a mentor. I had two mentors, people older than me who knew how to be leaders. I thought, what would they do? They hadn't told me what to do, but I just thought of their character and their way. So I stood up in front of the men and I said, gentlemen, under the regulations, I own your, you know what, from now until 11 p.m. The beer hall closes at 8:30. I bet you could finish that job in time to make the last beer call, because if you do, I go home to a good dinner. I'm going to go sit in my office. You let me know if you got a problem. I walked away. They all made beer call. Not only did they make beer call, the colonel called me in the next day and said, we've never had this building as clean as it is. What did you do? I wasn't going to tell him what I did. I looked at him deadpan and said, sir, I think the men who were on that detail, because they messed up, it was a disciplinary detail. I said, I bet those men are better troops than you realized. Let it go at that. You know, why make waves?
Very good. Did you ever use this waking hypnosis stuff on a more personal level, say in the romance department, maybe to convince somebody to, say, marry you? Watch out, she's on the line and she'll be here to say yes or no.
No, in Cheryl's case, I begged, pleaded, and did everything else.
There was no hypnosis involved?
I don't think so. In her predecessor, no, I don't think I used hypnosis there either.
Well, there might have been hypnosis involved, Larry. We just don't know who was the one that was hypnotized.
Bingo, you're right. Which would go along with the fact that I brag about what a good hypnotist she is today.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, you're lucky because we have her muted, although I realize that she's in the same house. She could run around and speak her mind if she ever wanted to.
I've been cued to ask you, actually, Larry, about the Meadowlands story.
Oh, okay. I was attending Dad's course, and one particular evening, he was heavy on self-hypnosis. That was the major topic of that particular lesson. So the next day, we're driving from North Jersey into Manhattan. And at that time, there was about a 6-mile stretch of road that crossed what was referred to as the Jersey Meadowlands. The Jersey Meadowlands, that's a very bad misnomer, is a very unpleasant swamp. And the road going through it was 2 lanes with no shoulders and a chain link fence down the median. So the result is if a car had a breakdown or stopped for any reason on that 6 miles, it created the biggest traffic jam in the world. And everybody knew you get a flat tire there, you drive to the end. You know, you don't ever stop in the Meadowlands, ever. So we're driving through there, and Dad and Mom are in the front, and I'm in the back seat, and I'm seated where I can see both of their faces in the rearview mirror. And suddenly Dad begins to fidget. And he's fidgeting quite a bit. My mother looks over and says, "Dave, what's wrong?" And my father, in a very plaintive voice, says, "I gotta make wee-wee." My mother says, "Can you make it?" "I don't think so." And a couple of seconds pass, and each of them says something more, and it's clear that this is a problem. And I leaned forward and I said, "Dad, last night's lesson was on self-hypnosis. Why don't you try it?" We made it through the Meadowlands.
That was conversational hypnosis, Larry.
Probably was. Probably was.
That's great. Gosh. So I wonder, I've got a few other things that I'm interested about, and some things that I know about because you've shared them with me. And I just think right now, I'm just thinking how cool it is for all of the folks that are here with us and the folks that will be watching this replay, is that thanks to, you know, the technology of this modern world, we are sitting here in the middle of coronavirus fright and all of that stuff, completely comfortable having a conversation with Larry Elman and listening to him reminisce about his dad. And I think that is just so cool. So I know you've got a story about waking hypnosis and traffic tickets that I just think is delightful.
Okay. I went to pay our babysitter, and she lived in a neighborhood where the road wound very, very bad tight turns. And so I'm driving through there, and you couldn't drive through there at more than about 15 or 20 because you'd be taking your life in your hands. And a motorcycle cop comes up and stops me. And I don't know what he's stopping me for. And he says, "You were doing 40 in a 20 zone." Well, you couldn't even do 20 in that area. So I knew it was something that was, a setup. So I was very polite to him, and I asked him, hey, how soon do you get off for lunch? And he told me. And I said, it's kind of funny. Why am I getting a ticket here? And he points across the street at a house and he says, that's where Councilman Bernardi's mother-in-law lives. And every time somebody hits a rose bush, because people come out drunk from that bar up the street, she tells our precinct captain 25 tickets have to be given out within sight of her rose bush, or she will order her daughter to, shall we say, frustrate the husband. I said, oh, which ticket am I? He said, you're number 24. Oh, that's interesting. And I talked with him, getting more of the story from him. Take the ticket, immediately go down to AAA, explain to them I'm going to fight the ticket, and they point to a file cabinet, 5 or 6 drawer file cabinet, and they said, that file cabinet is filled with the records of people who have tried and lost in fighting a ticket that came that way. It's a known problem. We've had this problem for quite some time. So, well, I'm going to fight it. And I said, you'll never win. So we get into court, and I said to the judge that I'd like to be my own lawyer. And the judge, of course, warns me that this is stupid. I very politely say, yes, sir, I understand that. I'm sure you've seen this bit on TV several times. And I tell my side of the story, omitting a lot of the details I just gave you. And then I asked the judge to call cop. The cop gets on the stand. And I said to the cop, which ticket was mine? I give out lots of tickets. Why would I know that? I said, I think you know which ticket was mine. Which ticket was mine in numerical order since you were assigned to that duty? And he keeps making excuses until finally the judge reaches over, grabs the ticket book and starts counting. And as he's counting, I smile at the judge and I said, you'll find it's number 24. And he gets there and it's number 24. I now have the judge's interest. And the rest of the story comes out piece by piece. The judge goes through the overhead and decides he's going to have the LA City Council discipline Councilman Bernardi for abuse of power. And I get off. And as I'm getting off from this, the judge turns to the cop and says, I understand you had no choice in this. So I am not going to punish you for what is technically a criminal offense, but since you had no choice, no punishment on you, which I thought was good on the part of the judge. I agree with that. We then begin hearing rumors that the judge may not have punished him, but he was reassigned on foot patrol on Mulholland Drive, which is the worst foot patrol assignment you can get in the LAPD. And he was on there for quite a while. So I'm driving home one night, and it's after dark, and I'm driving down one of these streets that is the back of several stores, so it's where the store deliveries are rather than where you come into the store. I'm driving along there, I notice that I can see the shiny spokes of a parked motorcycle where there shouldn't be one. Mm-hmm. That's kind of strange. A few seconds later, a motorcycle cop stops me. So I said to him, well, officer, my wallet is in my back pocket and I have some hip injuries and I can't reach it unless I can climb out of the car. Now I know and I understand that policemen are very, very ill at ease of somebody climbing in or out. They don't know if I'm armed and so on and so forth. Would you please handcuff me or whatever you have to do, but allow me to get out of the car. I'll cooperate fully, but I need to get out. And he does exactly that. And as I stand up getting out, I turn towards the spokes, wave. I don't remember the cop's name at this point, but I knew it then. Hi, Officer so-and-so. I see that they took you off of Mulholland Drive and gave you back your motorcycle. The other cop looks at me deadpan and says, are you that guy, Elman? I said, yeah. He says, get back in your car and leave. So I did. And in my rearview mirror, I watched two motorcycle cops having a fist fight in the middle of the street.
Mm. Wow. Cool.
Dad taught me a lot of things, some of which he didn't plan on teaching.
You know, Larry, I'm here in Orlando, as you know, and Orlando is famous for for a castle and a mouse and things like that. And what some people don't realize is that University of Central Florida, which is much closer to me than the Magic Kingdom, actually has an enrollment of 69,000 students and is just about the largest enrollment application. It's the largest enrollment school in Florida and just about one of the very top largest in the country. So we get issues in hypnosis with students and stuff. And I know you spent some time at MIT. I know you've got a story about a student with anxiety and another one about the deans. So tell us about your MIT days.
Hey, I happen to know you're going to even be teaching about that at the IACT INDHA conference in April.
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're doing it 1 hour on that. Tell us about that.
Okay.
Well, about working with test anxiety in general, not about your 1 hour, but.
Okay, the test anxiety one is fairly simple. I had a very good friend, very, very good friend, who was doing superbly academically and socially and everything else. But every time a final exam came up, he'd get the shakes. So finally, one time I was over at his house for dinner, and I said, well, you know, we can handle that. And I induced him, and I gave him a number of suggestions about his memory would be better. When he sat down to take the exam, as he picked up a pencil and opened the book, that would act as a trigger to excite the memory even more. He would remain calm. I'm sure there are dozens of our colleagues out there who could go right down a long list of test anxiety suggestions. There's no big secret to it. It's common.
Yeah.
And so I just used what I knew. No problem. And of course, he graduated fine. I did this for him a couple of times. I don't know how many, but several times. And so we go to the 50th reunion of our class. And Cheryl and I walk in, but the way a cocktail party for a reunion works, I end up here and she ends up there. And suddenly she calls out, Larry, come here. So I wind my way through the crowd and she says, Bob, tell Larry what you just told me. At the top of his lungs, he calls out, I wouldn't have graduated MIT if it weren't for Larry Elman. I look at him, I'm in shock. And I said, Bob, you were a better student. You had a better GPA. You understood the material better. You got on better with the professors. How can you possibly say this? And he says, Larry, don't you remember all the times that you got me through a final with hypnosis? Now, this is the secret part. We get back to our room in the hotel that night, and Cheryl says to me, Larry, you didn't remember that, did you? Oh. I said, did I cover it? Because I wouldn't want him to realize when that's important to him, that I didn't remember it. She said, no, I can read you like a book. I knew you didn't remember it, but nobody else at the cocktail party knew this. She said, why didn't you remember it? I was dumbfounded, and it took a while for me to realize I had given those same suggestions to enough students so that telling you which student I did or didn't was an impossibility. It was what you did for your classmates. They'll do something for you, whatever it may be, but it's what I would automatically do. So I didn't remember it as a separate incident.
Yeah.
Did they know that you're being hypnotized?
In his case, very definitely, yes.
So I mean, it was a formal thing. I am going to hypnotize you. This is going to help you with test anxiety. This
Yes.
is hypnosis.
Yes.
This was not overt. This was formal.
No, this was formal.
Now,
Not everyone was formal, but on test anxiety, it usually was.
Right.
I understand you did some waking hypnosis with the dean.
Yeah. In my day, if you cooked in the dorm, that would get you expelled from school. Not just from the dorm, but from school.
Wow.
That did not stop students from cooking. Just meant we had an early warning system. One day the early warning system fails. The first point at which I know that the dean is even in the building is when he turns the corner into my room. And I am in the midst of trying to make soup in an electric fry pan. Now I'll tell you something, a challenging cooking assignment is making soup in an electric fry pan. All right, but that's what I was doing. And behind me is a lineup of all the dishes I've stolen from Commons meals. They'll be returned at the end of the year, but this means if I have a girl over, I can set up properly. So he walks in on this, and what am I going to do? I poured a cup of soup immediately, and then I did something I didn't know at that time that what I was doing was well-defined. I just had a feeling it was the right thing to do. I stepped forward. Any NLPer will tell you that in a situation like this, stepping forward is taking command of the situation. I just did it. Stuck the soup right under his nose and said, "Dean, this is the best soup that has ever been made on the MIT campus. It makes you feel really hungry for it. Here's a spoon. Why don't you sit down on my bed and finish the bowl?" And he did.
Nice. See, now I would have messed it up, Larry. Larry, I would have said, "Have some soup," and your eyes are beginning to flutter, and they're going to close.
But then he would spill the soup.
True enough. True enough. Just a point of information. We're really about 5 minutes away from the end already. It's just fascinating how quick the time goes. If anybody has any that's in the room has any questions for Larry, you could throw them in the chat room or something so that we know, or even just put a question mark in the chat room so I know you've got one, and we'll open up your microphone and you can ask it. Otherwise, Larry and I and Karen are just going to keep carrying on here.
Well, I don't see anybody jump into it, and so I have a question for Larry, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
How quickly can you do the Elman induction?
Okay.
How quick? Oh, no, wait a minute. Just answer that question. I'm not asking you to do it yet.
I know. I'm going to answer the question.
Okay.
At the time that I went through Dad's course, the expected time to complete it, if you want to be in good standing in the course, was under 3 minutes. I was driving along. This is after we moved to North Carolina, so it's in the last couple of years. And I was playing one of Dad's recordings on my car cassette or player or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he suddenly says, "The standard for finishing this course has always been 3 minutes, but as of this session, we're dropping it to 1 minute. You have to do the Dave Elman induction in under 1 minute." So he didn't call it Dave Elman induction. I think he called it the rapid conditioning technique or something. But it's got to be done in under 1 minute. And I was so shocked by this, I jumped, and two of my wheels ended up in the ditch.
Mm.
I was able to pull the car back on the highway, but it was a near thing. So I decided, okay, I'll try it. I have made 58 seconds. But I'll tell you this, it's extremely hard, especially when your entire habits are based on the 3-minute one, and you're trying to do 58 seconds. It stinks. It's tough. I've done it 2 or 3 times. I'm not going to try it again. It's too tough.
But can you do 3 minutes?
Oh, of course.
Okay, we have 3 minutes, and I think I would feel cheated if I didn't get to experience Larry Elman taking me through the Elman Induction. Would you do that, please, in the 3 minutes we have left?
That's what you want.
I'd love that.
By the way, I'm not sure whether I'll be well under or a little bit over. I'm not looking at a clock. And as I've already said, I believe matching up with your client is more important than your clock. So please don't put a clock on me. I may be above, I may be below.
Okay.
Okay, take a long, deep breath. Let it out. You'll find that your eyes are starting to close. Let them close. Put your mind on those eyes and you'll find that they want to stay closed. Think about the fact your eyes want to stay closed and you'll find that you can't open them. Prove to yourself that you can't open them. Prove that they will not open. You may quit trying. Take another long, deep breath. Let that feeling of relaxation go from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. Now, in a moment, I'm going to have you open your eyes and then close them. And you're going to find when you do, it will make you go even deeper. Open your eyes, close them, and you'll go 10 times deeper. Take a long, deep breath and just enjoy the depth. Just relax and enjoy. We're going to do that again. When I tell you, you'll open your eyes and then close them. Open your eyes, and as you close them, you go 5 times deeper. Just let yourself go. And now we're going to do it one more time, and this time you'll go as deep as you want to go, as deep as you can. Open your eyes, close them, and go very, very deep. Long, deep breaths, a lot of relaxation. You'll go very deep. Now, you're going to stick out one arm, either arm, stick it out in front of you. And now make it rigid. Make it rigid. That arm is rigid. Rigid like a bar of iron. Rigid, rigid, rigid. You can't move it. Think that you can't. Now try and move it and it will not move. It can't move. It can't move. Now it suddenly will relax. And as it goes down by your side, you'll go even deeper. All right. Now then, you've got about as much physical relaxation as you need. But now we're going to also go for mental relaxation. I will want you to count backwards from 100. And with each count, you will take a breath and you'll find that you go deeper. And as you go deeper, the numbers will fade and finally disappear. Probably somewhere before 95 or 96, they'll be totally gone. They might even be gone well before that. Take a long, deep breath. And as you exhale, start counting out loud. out loud, please.
90.
Long, deep breath, and you're going deeper and deeper. And the numbers are gone, aren't they? All righty. Now, I hate to waste a good induction, so I want you to think of something that you would give yourself in the way of a hypnotic gift if you were in charge, and yet you're also the client. Think of something that would make you feel real good. You don't have to tell me, but when you have it in your mind, raise your other hand. Okay? Think about it. Think about it, and as that hand drops, a full suggestion for it will go right into your head. You know how to do that. I'm letting you do it yourself. When you're sure that suggestion is well in there and is going to take, emerge yourself. Just remember, emergence requires just a good health suggestion. How was that?
That was lovely. Thank you so
I'll
much.
admit to one thing. Cheryl can do it better, but don't tell her I said so.
Well, we won't let her know. It'll be just between you and me and Karen.
That's right.
Oh, and
Got
these
it.
folks and the people that they know, of course, as well. So, so Larry, we have come to the end of our time. So, but I want you to hang on for just a minute. Don't go away just yet. We got a little concluding business we need to do here, and then we want to say just a couple more words with you. So, welcome back, Karen.
Thank you.
So we want to mention a couple of things. Sunday night will be the last in a series. We've been doing a presenter series of folks that are presenting pre and post conference programs at the IMDHA Expo. And so that will be right here at this same exact login on Sunday night at the same time. That is, log in about 8:15 Florida time for an 8:30 start. And we're going to interview two people. The second one is Peter Blum, who does something with transonics. And then the first one is some kind of a cooking show, I believe, something about secret sauce or, well, do you remember what that was, Karen?
I believe it's called the Secret Sauce for Session Success.
Secret sauce for
I
session
will,
success.
I will give you some tips next time on the secret sauce. It's
So
going to make your session successful.
there you go. So Karen Hand and Peter Blum will be our guests on Sunday evening. And next month, so it's not Steve Jobs.
No, and it's not H.G. Wells.
Or Davy Jones.
Yeah. Must be Stephen G. Jones.
Steve G. Jones, as a matter of fact, right here on the virtual chapter, second Tuesday of next month, same login, same everything. Watch the virtual chapter for the announcement on the Facebook group. The video for this program tonight will be posted tomorrow on the IMDHA Mind Matters forum. If you are a member, you can log in and just pick that up there. And the other option, of course, is you can go to the virtual chapter group on Facebook, where the replay will be posted somewhere before noon tomorrow is what we always try to go for. It's also in the virtual chapters YouTube channel, and well, it's just about everywhere. And then people will start sharing it around as well. So so give it a look, because some of these stories you're going to want to listen to a second time, and even maybe a third time, and you're going to want to pass them on to people. So check them out. Don't forget to get your CEUs if you're members of IACT or IMDHA or other friendly hypnosis organizations that offer you CEUs for being at deals just like this one. Now, Larry, the reason we asked you to stay and to hang on for a minute is that at the end of the show, we get to do something so cool. And that is, and now it's appropriate tonight, Karen, to use that word.
I guess it is.
The word
Can
is
we
kick.
give Larry a chance to say where we can get in touch with him if we want to?
Oh, by all means, yeah, Larry. How can we get in touch with you?
Dave Elman Hypnosis Institute. And if Cheryl will open up her mic, because I know we've changed our email at one point, or our website or something. She knows it better than I do.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Cheryl. Cheryl, you there?
It's Dave Elman Hypnosis. I'm reading her lips. Say it again.
I wonder, Cheryl, if you could pop that into the chat room, because I'm not hearing you at all.
She's visible.
She is. Just say it, Cheryl, and I'll read your lips. Well, I can't now.
She'll be here in a second, just the adjoining room.
It's Dave Elman Hypnosis at gmail.com.
That's easy enough. Dave Elman Hypnosis at gmail.com.
And our phone number is 252-432-2205.
All right.
And we're doing something interesting since we just had to cancel 7 foreign countries because of the virus this year. We're going to be doing an online 12-week, once a week for 2 hours course of going and doing the hypnotherapy book, going through 2 chapters a week with everybody, a Zoom class, and everybody talking about those subjects on those nights. That'll be pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
That will be quite cool. So it's Dave Elman Hypnosis at gmail.com. And,
that's our email, and our website is daveelmanhypnosisinstitute.com.
Beautiful.
Thank
All right.
you very much.
So now here we go. The word that we can use tonight now is cacophony, because when we have too few people, it's just not quite cacophonous enough. And that sounds like something you really want in an age of the flu, isn't it? So, so what we're going to do now is we're going to open up everybody's microphones so that all at once we can just send you in a great cacophony of love and affection our appreciation for being with us. Larry, we're honored to know you, and Larry and Cheryl, what a team you guys are. So we're thrilled to have you here with us tonight, and really appreciate what you've done for us.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Love you tons.
Yes, it was great to see all of you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Larry, thank you so much.
Love you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So welcome. See y'all next time.
Michael. Thanks,
Bye.
Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
See you Sunday.
Bye.
Night.